a couple of you standing in front of a computer with my face in the background.
Yeah, that's weird, huh?
It's all working.
Okay, good. Well, we can get started. This is very odd because this is the first hybrid event that I've done. We've been doing everything by Zoom, and so it's fun to have some people here and some people on Zoom. So thanks for coming today. We have a great talk for you. When I learned that Sam was going to be leaving us and kind of, I've been following her journey here as a postdoc for several years, and I knew I needed to catch her before she leaves to give us some wisdom about her career path. So thanks for coming today. Just a little bit about Sam. She holds a BS in molecular biology with biochemistry from the University of Pittsburgh and a PhD in biomedical sciences from the University of California, San Francisco. She's been a postdoc here in the College of Medicine's Department of Microbial Pathogenesis and Immunology for 6 years. She studies host pathogen interactions of tuberculosis and the innate immune system. She has served in leadership positions with the TAMU Postdoc Association, including treasurer, vice president, and president. We also have a postdoc association here in the Health Science Center, and we currently don't have anyone in our executive committee. So if you're interested, please come and let me know, because we do need some volunteers for that to serve in those positions. Those leadership positions are really important for your resume. Just a little side note there. So Sam was recently awarded an NIAID New Innovator DP2 grant to establish her own research program, and she's going to be leaving us in August to become an assistant professor at Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School in Newark, New Jersey. So please welcome Dr. Samantha Bell.
Okay, so thank you for that introduction. Just to go off of what you were talking about with leadership and postdoc association, I think at multiple times during my talk, I'm going to emphasize why you should sign up for leadership positions in those sorts of organizations. And yeah, so I'm going to talk today about my experience on the job market this past year about. And I hope that I can sort of, by sharing my experience, sort of tell you some of the things that I've learned, the lessons that I've learned, some of the resources that I've found useful, maybe what I would do differently if I were to go back and do it again. When I put this talk together, I think I was really kind of focused on people who are really getting close to going onto the job market in the next year or two. But I also think that if you're kind of far away from being on the job market, I have a lot of what I'm going to talk about is sort of, getting started early and prepping yourself for being on the job market. So I think it's also useful if you're still several years away from being on the job market. Okay, so there are three main things I'm going to talk about today. So I'm first going to tell you about my personal search, my personal job search. And I think it's really important to realize that everyone's job search is going to be very different. So I'm going to tell you from my perspective, but just remember it's my perspective. So there are a lot of things that can impact your job search on like a faculty job search, and it's things that are sort of inherent to you, like what you value and what your priorities are. Also things like your training, your field, and then there's also sort of uncontrollable things like what the job market happens to be like that particular year you're on the job market, which obviously impacted me pretty significantly this past year. But yeah, so I'm going to tell you my experience so you sort of understand where I'm coming from with and understand my perspective with the advice that I give you. Okay, and then I'm going to tell you sort of, my approach to being on the job market. So if you're sort of looking around saying, okay, I have to go on the job market this year, where do I even start? I have sort of some timeline information and some resources that I helpful. And then I'll sort of tell you some lessons that I learned, some things that I might do different if I had it to do over again, and just some things that I found especially useful going through.
टिश्यू पेपर लाओ, उसमें पोंछो, नोज और फिंगर में लगा है.
Oh, you just ask them to mute their microphone. Oh, can you mute your microphone, please? Okay. Okay. So I'm going to start with my search, which I don't know. You probably realize I did my job search during COVID, which made me feel like slightly insane at various points for various reasons. Okay, so just to sort of like tell you about me, Stacey already sort of talked about some of this, but I did undergrad at the University of Pittsburgh. I'm from Pittsburgh. And I actually did a lot of undergrad research while I was there. I spent about 3 years in a really great lab, had a really great mentor, and I actually got some publications out of my undergrad research. And then I did my PhD at UCSF in Jeff Cox's lab, where I studied tuberculosis and a lot of different aspects of TB infection. So cell biology, bacterial genetics, just infectious disease, immunology. And while I was there, like the only teaching I've really done in the course of my training really was to be a TA and a tutor for the cell biology graduate program. And then as a postdoc, so I've been here for about 6 years, well, exactly 6 years. And I continued working on TB when I started my postdoc. I actually joined Robbie Watson's lab when it was only about 6 months old. And I knew Robbie had been a postdoc in the Cox lab at UCSF, so I knew him from there. And I was his first postdoc when he started his lab here. And during my postdoc, you know, I've gotten pretty involved in various things on campus. So leadership positions in the Texas A&M Postdoc Association. I also do a lot of different volunteering and participating in other programs and just sort of like committees and things like that when it comes to like outreach, professional development, and those sort of things. So those sorts of things have become really important to me personally. Like beyond science, I'm really interested in mentoring and professional development, advocacy, diversity and inclusion, all those sorts of things. So being involved in those sorts of things sort of like feeds my soul a little bit in addition to the science that I get to do at the bench. Okay, so I'm going to sort of like walk you through the timeline of what my job search looked like and how it evolved over the year and a half, the past like year and a half. So I'm going to start with like what my situation sort of looked like in like fall of 2019, which is like a year and a half ago. COVID has destroyed perception of time, but so basically, so I work on TB, and sort of like the overarching thought in my brain when I think about going on the job market is always that, okay, I work on TB, which gives me a unique expertise because TB is a BSL-3 pathogen. TB is also, until COVID, was the infectious disease that killed the most people worldwide. So it's generally like decently high impact research that is like decently easy to fund, and we have a decently easy time getting into like at least mid-tier journals. So like I knew that going into it, like my research has the potential to get me a job. And my BSL-3 expertise also has the potential to like help get me a job. And also the sort of research that I do, like I tend to do pretty collaborative and multidisciplinary research, collaborating with other labs and sort of integrating a lot of different approaches into the context of like TB infection. So I knew that would also be a strength when I go on the job market. But the flip side of working with TB is that I have to go somewhere that has BSL-3 facilities. So that immediately limits the options of where I can go. And realistically, it sort of limits it down to medical schools. And I also don't have a ton of teaching experience. I also don't really want to do a ton of teaching undergrads. So that further brings it down to basically medical schools that
I'm going to ultimately be applying to. And then, so I also didn't have any postdoc fellowships. And this is like a controversial statement, but I'm going to call my publication record modest, especially in fall 2019. A lot of my papers were like still in progress. If you just looked at my CV, my publication record, it was fine. It wasn't as strong as I felt like it needed to be super competitive applying in these med schools that I wanted to go to. So these were sort of like the pluses and minuses when I like looked at my situation in 2019. And really when I looked at it, I looked at it thinking, okay, like in a year, I'll be in a much better position to apply. But then I got this NIAID DP2 award, which is basically, it's a grant that it's actually bigger than any K award. It's the size of an R01 that like the NIAID gives to postdocs to sort of transition into independence. And I knew that with that award, I'd be able to get a job because you're bringing a ton of money to the school. So that was really exciting. The one thing about this award, though, was that it came with a deadline, so I had to activate it within a year. So then the problem with that is that, okay, you are then limited to whoever happens to be hiring in that year. You don't have 2 years to sort of explore options. But the like benefits of that award was like far outweighed by any of the negatives. But the thing about this award, and I think that there are two lessons that come from it that I'm going to come back to over and over again, I think. So I heard about this award while I was at a conference, sort of just talking to other postdocs. So I was just networking and found out about this award. And this postdoc that I was talking to told me, you know, NIAID is doing this brand new grant. It's a decently large proposal and it's due in a month, but like no one really knows about it because it's so new. And so I got home after hearing about that grant, and I sort of did an analysis of like, you know, is it worth it to spend 4 weeks writing this grant when I have papers I should write? Is it worth my time? But also like no one knows about the award. No one knows about the grant yet. I think I have a good idea for the grant. Should I just go for it, even though like with my publications, I didn't feel super competitive? But I ultimately made the decision to just go for it and apply for the grant. And like, at least I would be able to like reapply later, get the grant in the system. So I took that risk and applied for that grant, even though I didn't know if I was going to get it. I didn't know if I was competitive. I didn't know if I was like ready for the grant. But I applied for it and I got it. And really applying for and getting this grant has been career changing in various ways that I'll come back to. Okay, so I found out about that grant in like March 2020, and then COVID happened and lockdowns happened, and COVID turned the job market upside down. So a lot of different things happened. So it was actually really sad to see. So like people's offers got pulled, searches got canceled. People were like left on the job market thinking they were about to sign an offer. So that left more people on the job market still looking for jobs, but also left vacancies in openings that hadn't been filled because of the hiring freezes. I actually, in the spring, early summer, I actually got really freaked out. I didn't think I was going to get a job at all because no one seemed to be hiring. And I think a lot of other people felt that same way, and people sort of didn't even bother going on the job market. It did like a lot of really weird things to the job market. But the other thing about it was that I was lucky because ultimately what ended happening this past cycle is that not many people were hiring, but of the people who were hiring, a lot of them were microbiology and immunology departments because COVID. And luckily I happened to be micro and immunology. The one drawback is a lot of people were looking specifically for virologists, and I'm a bacteriologist, but ultimately the fact that micro and immuno departments were hiring was really lucky for me because it was otherwise a terrible market. Okay, and then the other sort of like impact of COVID that I think really did impact my search a lot was that I think a lot of people experience this, but during lockdown, when we were all sort of quarantined, it allowed you to do a lot of self-reflection and thinking about what your priorities are, thinking about what matters to you. I did a lot of thinking about like, where I wanted my career to be in the next 10, 20 years, what kind of science I wanted to be doing, like what was important to me in life. And ultimately, so that helped me like develop my research plan for the job market, but it also made me sort of think about my priorities in life. And so I'm from Pittsburgh. My family lives in the Northeast Midwest. So I think before I wasn't super attached to any specific location when I thought about going on the job market. But because of COVID and because of the isolation and separation from my family, the geographic aspect became a thing that I was more concerned about. And I was more interested in specifically getting a job in the Northeast and Midwest so that I could be closer to my family. But that's another one of those things where it sort of limits the schools that you are ultimately going to be a good fit at. Okay, so ultimately my search was successful. I'd actually say it's extremely successful. I'm super excited. I got an assistant professor position. It's tenure track at Rutgers in Newark. It's a really good fit for me personally. Newark's across the river from New York City, which is where my sister lives. I'm joining a group of really supportive and collaborative TB researchers that I can work with and collaborate with and learn a lot from. And it honestly like checks all of my boxes. The issue, and this is when it comes back to sort of like everyone's search is going to be very, very personalized, because Rutgers really doesn't hire people that don't have a K award or some sort of funding coming in with them. So if I hadn't had my DP2, if I hadn't had that funding coming in, I wouldn't be going to Rutgers. This position also wasn't like publicly listed. I found out about the position through networking, which emphasizes the true importance of networking. But like if I hadn't happened to make that connection through networking, I also wouldn't be at New York. So it's really sort of like everything aligned perfectly and is resulting in me going to this place that I'm super excited about, that I think is a really great fit. And this is my future lab space. Okay, so now let's talk about my approach. So I was talking to my sister about what pictures I should use for this and what we should use, what picture would fit my approach. And my sister has obviously been very supportive during the job search. And the thing with the job search is it's very overwhelming. It takes a long time. It's very stressful. There's so many moving pieces. And we always sort of say to each other, how does a snake eat a cucumber? Or a snail. How does a snail eat a cucumber? Caitlin, you know the answer.
I do.
Don't you? Have I not said this to you?
You haven't said it to me.
So a snail eats a cucumber one bite at a time. And we sort of say that to each other to sort of really emphasize that, like, when you're being overwhelmed by how much you have to do, how big a thing is, it's really helpful to just take a step back and say, okay, one bite at a time, like one piece at a time, like do this phase of the search first. Like, don't worry about what you're gonna have to do in 3 months, giving a job talk in front of all these experts in your field. Just worry about finishing your cover letter. So that's really been like a strong theme in my brain the past like year during this process. Okay. So this is sort of like the rough timeline. I'm gonna again say here, like, this was my timeline. I think that COVID did mess with the timeline a little bit. It sort of like delayed things because everyone was sort of delayed because of the shutdowns that happened in the spring. So I don't fully know what it's like during a real year, but this is sort of a rough idea. So early summer, I started to brainstorm my different pieces of my documents, started to draft them. I joined Future PI Slack, which is a super important community that I'm going to talk about more in a minute. And I started to reach out to my network. So my past mentors, like official and unofficial, I emailed them. I told them about my DP2 and sort of just told them, I'm going on the job market. If you hear of anything, let me know. Let me know if like anyone's hiring that isn't like advertising the posting, so that like people knew I was on the market. Okay, and then by late summer, I started asking for my letters of recommendation. I actually don't think I was this on top of things. Theoretically, your documents will be done and you're sort of getting feedback and revising those documents and really like making them perfect, getting ready to submit them. And then early fall is sort of when most positions start opening up and you start seeing a lot of ads being posted on the different sites. So during that process, I sort of like inventoried all the openings that I thought were a fit for me, started tailoring the documents to the specific positions I was applying for, and then actually submitting those documents. And then in late fall is sort of when the deadlines are. That's sort of when things are due. You start getting invites for Zoom interviews for like the screenings. And then this is also when I started, really putting together my job talk, putting together my chalk talk, and practicing those things. And then winter is when the interviews, the offers, and the negotiations happen. Okay, so Future PI Slack. Do people know what Slack is? Okay. You all know what Slack is? So it's sort of like a messaging app. I don't know if you know what Discord is. It's sort of similar to Discord. Well, I don't know what Discord is. I don't use Discord. But Slack is like a messaging platform that a lot of labs are using to communicate with each other as opposed to email. And there are a lot of different Slack communities that are popping up now to sort of like build communities of different people with different interests. And there's a Slack for future PIs. And future PI Slack is truly so important for so many reasons. So this is I'm going to give Stacey all the PowerPoints so that you have this information. But this is the website where you sign up for Future PI Slack. And Future PI Slack is a community, also has a ton of resources. So they have all sorts of example documents for the different documents that you have to prepare for the application package. They also have peer review groups where you can exchange your documents with other people, have them read it, get feedback. There's also this spreadsheet that becomes an obsession to most people, but it's an anonymous spreadsheet where people track the applications and track the communications that they're getting from different departments so that so if you submitted your application to some school and you're not hearing anything from them, but then you see someone else got invited for an interview, you can at least get some sort of closure in knowing that, okay, you're probably getting rejected.
Oh my God. I'll give you the samples.
Is there a question, or could you mute your microphone? Okay. And then there's also lots of people on there just willing to answer various questions you have. And it's actually, Future PI Slack is great for the job market. It's also great for like submitting like K awards, just submitting like other postdoc fellowships. It's like generally good for like any stage of your postdoc. So I highly recommend joining it. It also gives you a community of people that are going through the same thing as you. So not many people here were going through the job search when I was, or that I knew of. So like this community of people really gave me like people to talk to that could relate to everything I was going through. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about the application package, and I'm not going to talk about the documents because I don't think that I have the expertise to do that. So, I mean, I wrote my documents, like I have my documents if anyone wants to like see them as an example, but like I'm not an expert on how to write your research plan or your cover letter. Like I know what I did, but like that doesn't make me an expert. So I will tell you the resources that I used. So the NIH Office of Intramural Training and Education, OITE, they have a ton of great workshops that they're doing all the time, but they also have a YouTube channel. And early in the summer, I knew I was going to have to go on the job market, but I was very overwhelmed and very intimidated, and I didn't know what to do. I was kind of paralyzed. But they did this this like webinar. It's a 2-hour-long like webinar called Preparing Your Job Package. And it was super helpful. It outlines all the different pieces, what goes into them. It made it just feel very approachable. And I actually like left that webinar feeling very motivated and empowered to go write my documents. So I highly, highly, highly recommend this like 2-hour webinar. It's like totally worth your time. And then there's some other things that I went to. So I went to this, and this Torrey Pines one, I don't know if it's going to continue to be available online. I think because of COVID, it was over Zoom. I don't know if that's going to continue to happen. But this Torrey Pines training that I did, I think it cost like $75, but it was really good. It was about applying for the job, like negotiating your job, and then once you start your job. And a lot of their like how to apply to the job, like I had already gotten my job at that point, but they had really good seminars, especially on the how to write your diversity statement was especially good. It had really good advice in it. So I thought that like that symposium was especially useful for doing these job documents. And then the reality is our postdoc associations, so everything that Stacy does and things that the Texas A&M, like the overarching, like all the postdoc associations consistently try to do workshops and seminars that teach you how to write these different documents. So a few years ago, I went to one on how to write a cover letter. Like I referenced the notes from that seminar when I was writing my cover letter. Like it's one of those things where like these seminars are always happening. You should really go to them. They are useful. And like, even if you're 2 years away from needing to write a cover letter, go to the workshop, because then you'll be prepared when the time does come to write these documents. So A&M has a lot of different resources for learning how to do these things. You just have to take advantage of them. So one of the things that was really helpful for the Chalk Talk was that when our department was hiring a few years ago, they invited all the postdocs to come to the Chalk Talk so that we could at least like see what it's like and sort of get an idea of what we should be doing during our Chalk Talks. So I had gone to those several years ago. Even at the time, I went to those Chalk Talks and left thinking I could never do that. I at least knew what it should be when I was ready and like had enough experience and ideas to do my own. And then I asked for a lot of advice from a lot of different people. So my PIs, other mentors I have, other newer hires, some of my friends who have recently been hired, all those people have really good advice. And they also have their application packages. So like, you just have to ask for help, ask for advice, ask for examples. And when you get examples like that, you can look and see what other people have done, use what you think is useful, ignore the rest of it. You know, like the more examples that you have, the better you're going to be able to make your own a strong application. Okay. So when it comes to getting feedback, it's really important, but you also have to give people enough time, which is why it's important to start working on your documents early, so that they're done early enough that you can still give people time to give you good, meaningful feedback. I gave my documents to another postdoc in the lab. You can also, like I said, Future PI Slack has these like peer review groups that you can get feedback from. I also got feedback from my letter writers. So the people I was asking to write me letters would need to know what my research plan was anyway, right? So if they're going to read my research plan so that they're like informed in writing my letter, they might as well also give me feedback on what's in the research plan. And yeah, so like I said, writing these documents and revising them takes a long time. It actually takes a really long time. I think for me, COVID made it a little weird because there was lockdown happening. So I was kind of working full time on it because like it was lockdown, and like even working kind of full time, it took me like 2, 3, 4 weeks to write my documents. But it would take even longer if you're just doing it part-time and like still doing bench work in non-COVID times. And then revise them over and over and over again. Like even during the process of sending out my applications, like the earlier applications I submitted were probably not as strong because every application I submitted, I sort of like made small changes and revisions to my documents, and like they got better with time. So just give yourself plenty of time to be revising and editing and getting feedback. Okay, so recommendation letters for these applications are actually kind of a nightmare because there's a lot of moving pieces and people and PIs to wrangle. So you should always give them at least 2 weeks notice to write your letter, first off, at least. And you should generally be prepared to write your own letter. Like, a lot of people don't write your letter from scratch. And what I did, because I was applying to so many different places, and honestly, like, I think I applied to 27 places, which is not actually like that huge of a number. Because there's so many different applications, I made a spreadsheet for all of my reference letter writers, basically outlining the school, the department, the deadline, and like the method of submission. So some of them you'll like there's just a lot of different ways that different schools collect the recommendation letters, and it gets really confusing. So I tried to make it as easy as possible for my letter writers so that I could feel more confident that they would actually do it. And at a certain point, there's probably some micromanaging that's going to have to happen to making sure your letters get submitted. So like, I was sending reminder emails and probably annoying emails asking like if they had done something, but like it's on you to make sure your letters get submitted with your application. So like you have to do what it takes to help your letter writers have all the information and like be organized for them, basically. And I think that's true for not just job applications. I think that's true for like fellowships and stuff too. You have to sort of take ownership of that. And then, so this is like highly specific information, but there's two websites that a lot of applications sort of get submitted through, and that's Interfolio and Academic Jobs Online. And those are sort of like platforms where you can have your reference letter writers upload their general letter for you without any specifics in it, like school names. And then once those confidential letters are uploaded onto those sites, you can just attach those letters to like whatever other application you're doing. And I think there's a way for Interfolio. You can like also use Interfolio to attach letters to other applications that don't use Interfolio. But that got too complicated for me, so I didn't do that. But that's a thing, apparently. Okay. So when it comes to job postings, there are like 5 places in my experience for the types of jobs that I was looking at where jobs are posted. And realistically, it was really these first 2 that were the most important. So science careers and nature careers, that's generally where most schools are posting all of their job openings. Job Archive is like an offshoot of BioArchive. And they also had job postings, but generally anything on Job Archive was already either on science or nature. When it came to submitting applications, I had this giant spreadsheet to sort of like record all of the openings that I was going to apply for. So I'd go through the websites and pick out which ones were a fit for me. And if I thought it was a reasonable fit, I would record things like the website for the listing itself, the school, the department, the deadline, and then like what documents each application required and like any specific requirements for those documents, like page numbers, things like that. And that spreadsheet was really helpful in figuring out what I needed to prepare for each of the applications. And part of what becomes so time consuming and so labor intensive about the job application process is that every job requires a slightly different set of documents with slightly different page numbers. And it becomes a lot to keep track of, and you want to do it right. Like you want to follow the rules, otherwise your application might not get considered. So it's a lot to keep track of, lots of moving parts, lots of different versions of different documents. And having a spreadsheet like this from the start was really helpful in just organizing the process. Okay, and then the other thing about submitting these applications is you want to tailor them to the different postings. So the main thing that I was focused on when it came to tailoring my applications was really showing for each school the value you would add to their department. So you don't just want to say like how you would do well in their department. You want to show these different professors how you could benefit them. Like, how would it be good for them to have you as a new PI in their department? Like, what can you offer them? Because that's something that if you can get them excited about what you could offer to them, like that's going to get your application put into the yes pile. So it's also a delicate balance. So you want to highlight how you would fit in the department, like how your research makes sense in the context of the rest of the departmental research. But you also don't want to seem redundant. So you also need to show how you're unique and novel and how what you would bring is not the same as what's already in the department. This happens many times where you're trying to walk this very fine line between like, I fit well, but I'm not redundant. It's also a very hard line, and like you can't really do both of those things well. So I think a lot of people, when I was preparing my research plan especially, a lot of people were talking about how they were changing their research plan for every application they submitted. I did not do that. The only thing I was really changing from application to application was my cover letter. So every cover letter is going to have like the different school names and things like that. And then the last paragraph is like specific to how you fit at that department. So that was changing every time. And when you personalize your cover letters for every school, I was obsessively checking the details to make sure I'm not sending an application to Duke that says, consider me for this position at Yale. Like that is a true nightmare to me. So I was triple checking all those details. And I think a lot of people would look past a mistake like that, but it's also, I was being very meticulous about those sorts of details to make a good first impression, because there are so many applications coming in that could be the thing that get your application put in the no pile. So I was obsessive about that kind of stuff. And then I was also personalizing other documents like the diversity statement and mentoring and teaching statements, depending on what they wanted. And especially the diversity statement, like what opportunities were already available at the university and like what I would participate in and utilize there. And the reality of the situation is that every application that you're tailoring like that, it takes a few hours, because you have to read through all the faculty, you have to know what the faculty research is in order to be able to say how you would fit in. You have to read all of the diversity programs that the university has in order to tailor that statement for that. There's a lot of research you're doing for every single application in order to prepare it. Okay, so then in late fall, once all these are submitted and you start doing interviews, so the Zoom interviews are like, honestly, the Zoom interviews I think are mostly to make sure you're the one that wrote the application, and they're sort of just double checking and sort of like getting a feel for how you interact as a person. So there's a list of questions that they tend to ask. I'm not really going to go through it, but you'll have these slides. And then when it comes to the job talk, I am a big believer in signing up for giving a talk anytime you can, because giving all these departmental seminars, research in progress talks at conferences, even different like the graduate research symposium here or postdoc symposium here, these are all chances to practice your public speaking, to get better at it, and also chances to sort of hone your story. And you want your story to be really concise and clear by the time you're giving your job talk. So all of these things throughout your postdoc career are helping prepare you for giving this job talk and giving a good impression. I'm a really big believer in using a lot of schematics and models. And for that, we use BioRender. I feel like I could be a salesperson for BioRender. You should also be giving lots of practice talks to get feedback. And it's good to do this for peers as well as mentors. It's especially good to do it for peers that aren't in your lab, because your lab is like too close to it. So other postdocs in the department, other postdocs in other departments, to make sure like you're not talking about things so myopically that people in other fields won't get it. Because a lot of times these job talks are to a broader audience than just a microbiologist, right? For me. And yeah, I spent a really long time on my job talk putting my slides together, and I spent a lot of time up front, and then once I had my slide deck, I could just sort of like adjust it for every talk. It's very similar to the application itself, where spend the time up front making it perfect, and then you can just make small changes later down the line to make it particular. And then the last thing, and I think this goes for any talk, but I think for any talk, the point is to tell a clear and concise story. it's more important to tell a good story than to like shock and awe people with the amount of data you've collected. Because if you're just showing them data after data after data, but they don't like contextualize it, they don't get it, it doesn't matter how much data you're showing. Like that's not actually as impressive as I think we think it is sometimes. It's more important to tell a good story, to teach them something. And sometimes that means showing less data, and that's fine. You don't have to show every experiment you've ever done. Okay, so for the interviews and negotiations, I'm not really going to talk much about this, because especially the interviews. I think my experience being all over Zoom and my talks all over Zoom is just not representative, and I don't think my advice is like applicable. But I think the thing to remember with interviews is that, you know, they're really looking for a colleague, and they're looking for someone that's going to contribute, not just, they want someone that's going to contribute to the department, not just sit in their office and sit in their lab pipetting. And like maybe some departments just want someone to be there pipetting. That's not where I want to go. That's not what I value. So really, they're looking for someone who's going to contribute to the research in the department, but also things like the department culture, teaching in the department, someone that's going to work with other people in the department and like contribute to collaborations and things like that. So you really, especially during the interview, you want to sort of highlight that you're not just a scientist, you're more than just a scientist. And it's also a two-way street. So they're interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them. You're trying to find a place that you are going to fit and be happy, as well as a department that will take you. And then, of course, you want to be yourself, as long as yourself isn't a rude person. So you want to be polite and humble. And especially when you're dealing with administrative assistants, like, don't be rude to them. I don't know why I have to say that, but like, don't, like, be nice. I don't know. And you want to be humble, especially like answering questions, but you also want to be confident. It's another one of those things where it's like, be humble, but be confident. Do both of these opposite things at the same time. And then just a few comments on negotiations. Negotiations truly suck. They're so uncomfortable. I know so many of us hate them, but you have to do it. It's expected. You can't just accept your first offer. Like, you literally can't. You have to ask for more. And the worst they're going to say is no. And if they're going to say no and pull the offer because you asked for more, you shouldn't go there, honestly. And I got a lot of input and advice from different people when I was doing the negotiations, sort of as like a gut check to make sure I wasn't being unreasonable. And that's sort of, by asking those people, like, is this unreasonable to ask for? Then when I would go into the negotiations, I knew I wasn't asking for ridiculous things. I was asking for normal things, and like I didn't need to be worried about the response I was going to get. And then, of course, if it's possible, having multiple offers gives you leverage to get a better offer. I think that goes without saying. Are there questions that I can pause for before I go to the next section?
I do, Sam. So I have one question.
Yeah.
So how big you want your cover letter to be? Since you were mentioning like about the cover letters and you take care of the first paragraph and the last paragraph.
Yeah. So
how people are actually interested to read a full page cover letter? Yeah.
So so a lot of people say it should be a page and a half. Mine was a full 2 pages. I don't know if you're here when I said this. I like don't really want to give it. I don't really want to give advice on the actual documents, because like I know what I submitted, but like I don't know what you should submit. Like I haven't been on recruitment committees to like know what's expected. So like I don't want to tell you what to do, but there are resources and links in here that you can reference that are like more reliable than me telling you what I happen to do. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you about my lessons that I've learned. This is what worked for me. You don't have to listen if you don't want to, and maybe the things I'm going to tell you aren't important to you, and that's fine, but I'm going to tell you what I did and what I think worked. You can take it or leave it. Okay, so the first thing is to get involved. And I think that this has to happen early. So this goes back to what I was saying with they're not just looking for a scientist. The reality is these openings have hundreds of applications and it's hundreds of great scientists. So So at a certain point, you have to do things that are going to differentiate you from those other hundreds of applications. And part of that comes in with being able to add value in other ways. And that comes from getting involved and doing things like leadership activities, doing things like volunteer work, to do outreach, and to just like be involved in other things on campus other than just what you're doing at the bench. And I know as a postdoc, there's so much pressure to produce at the bench, and it can be really hard to try to balance bench work with non-bench work. And especially if you have a family, right? Like I don't have a family and it's already a lot for me to balance. So like I can imagine if you have to do bench work and other non-bench work and deal with a family, it's a lot. Like I get it. I don't have advice in that respect. It's a lot. But I do think it's really important to get involved in various ways. Part of why it's super important is that in these other statements, like the diversity statements, the teaching statements, the mentoring statements, you have to have specific examples of what you've done and like what your experiences are in these different things. And if you're only doing bench work, you're not going to have the specific examples. And the thing is, if all of these different experiences take time to accumulate. So like you need to be involved in different things early on so you can start accumulating those experiences, because you're not going to be able to in 6 months accumulate 5 different experiences in diversity and inclusion, 5 different teaching. You can't do all of that at once. So it really needs to be a consistent effort over time to do other activities beyond just bench work.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What is diversity activities?
So, Alex, so there's diversity committees around. There's also like, I do a lot of volunteer work for like high schoolers and undergrads, like science, like judging science fairs. There's like
just
mass committee. Yeah, there's a lot of different options, and we get a lot of emails about them. Like we get a lot of emails about opportunities for doing these different things. You just like really have to pay attention to the emails that you get on these different listservs, and there are opportunities. If you email me later, I can try to send like specifics. Okay. The other thing that's great about them is the networking that they let you do. So networking is really one of those things where it's like you don't know who you're going to meet and how that person might help you. And as an example, I every year judge the Student Research Week. I can't remember what it's called. Student Research Week. And I happened to be judging some grad students, and one of the grad students gave a talk about, drug screens and bacteria. And I was like, I'm going to be looking for postdocs. Like if you want a postdoc, like just shooting my shot, right? And I'm like trying to recruit her as a postdoc now, and she's a really good postdoc. And if I hadn't been judging Student Research Week, I would not have made that connection, and I wouldn't have that potential happening. And it's one of those things where it's like you never know what opportunities you're going to miss out on if you're not doing networking and you're not being involved. Like being involved has a lot of different benefits to it. It also, this is a little woo-woo, but like it lets you discover your passions. So diversity and inclusion, mentoring, professional development, those sorts of things are really important to me. And I've kind of discovered that by being on the PDA leadership and things like that. And it comes down to, so I think when we think about our careers as postdocs, we're sort of like, at a certain point, we're sort of going through the motions and checking off the boxes, right? You go to grad school, you do a postdoc, you get a job in academia, you get tenure. So like there's this clear path, but then even once you get tenure, like beyond the science, there has to be something that's driving you. And I think for a lot of people, you don't really stop and realize that until you've gotten tenure and you look around and you say, well, now what? So I think it's good to, throughout your career, be doing different experiences that let you explore different interests and different passions beyond just the bench work. Being obsessed with the bench work is great, but like there are other things out there too that you can participate in to advance science and academia. And then it also lets you build skills. So it lets you fill out your CV. Like all these experiences can go on your CV, which makes you look good on your applications. And it generally gives you skills that are going to make you better as a PI. Like going to professional development workshops makes me a better postdoc, but it also like prepares me for being a PI, which is a very different job than being a postdoc. So these things are important in a lot of different ways. Okay, so let's talk about Twitter. So I personally have always been very resistant to doing a lot of like science communication and participating heavily on like science Twitter because it's a lot of work and I've just not really participated significantly in it. The reality though is that it does let you network with colleagues in the field, especially during COVID times when no one's going to meetings. It lets you connect with people, make new connections, and also maintain connections that you've made in the past. And then you also learn about opportunities like job openings. There's a lot of seminar series that are all over Zoom now that I know about because of Twitter. And the way I got my job is my PIs are active on Twitter and they tweeted about my grant. And Jason Yang, who is at Rutgers, saw their tweet. He reached out to me and said, oh, you should, we don't have any listings advertised right now, but you should consider Rutgers. So if my PIs hadn't been active on Twitter, I would not have my job. Like I literally have my job through networking through Twitter. So like I am a science Twitter convert now because like it's how I got my job. So like it's really hard to dismiss the importance of being on science Twitter when I'm coming from where I'm coming from. It also, there have been studies that if you tweet about papers, they statistically get more citations. So it's good to be on science Twitter, to be promoting your work, because a lot of the papers that I read because I see tweets about them. And that's true for a lot of people. And then it's also nice for like community building sorts of stuff where you start to realize like other people are going through similar things as you, other scientists are human, we're all sort of doing these hard things and it's hard for everyone. You're not alone in the situation. Okay, so I think the other really important thing to remember during the job search is that it's really hard. It's honestly, well, I don't know. I mean, it's been the hardest year of my life, partially because of COVID, but also like the job market is really hard. It's really hard. And you have to have people around you that you can lean on, because I know without these people, I wouldn't, it was just a lot. It's a lot to deal with. So there are a lot of people that I relied on. So there's of course my mentors. So my PIs, Robbie and Kristen, were super helpful in putting my materials together, helping me develop my job talk, all of that. Clearly they're like the lead people, right? But there's also a lot of other faculty that I talked to and relied on throughout the process that gave me different perspectives and just helped me in various ways. Philip West especially has been a lifesaver. And then my friend Liz got her job a year ago. So I've actually been talking to her a lot, getting her advice because she just got hired. And then I also sort of reestablished so Jeff Brodsky was my undergrad PI, and he's a fantastic mentor, and I lost a little bit of contact with him, but during this past year, I've relied on him a lot for his advice because he is just a great mentor and has a lot of wisdom and advice. So I think it's really useful to remember that, you know, your previous mentors are still invested in you and still have a lot of advice and a lot of wisdom that they can offer you, and they're happy to do it. They want to see you succeed, right? So it can be like a good way to sort of rekindle that mentoring relationship. Okay, then my sister was super important in my support system. And then I also had several friends that were really super important. Caitlin, who's here. And then my two of my really good friends from grad school were also really reliable. And Jillian actually wrote the title of my talk. And then I also, of course, talked to my lab mates a lot. They sort of gave me pep talks, but I would come out of my conference room where I was on Zoom all day long and get various pep talks from Crystal and Allison and Haley. And then again, in the support system, like having these people on Future PI Slack who are going through the same process as you, they're dealing with the same frustrations. We also have the same feelings about things. So it's really helpful to know that you're not alone. And Future PI Slack was really useful in sort of like giving me a lot of other people that I could talk to about those things. And then also found them through Twitter, but I also found some other people who had been awarded the DP2 and were literally going through the exact same thing with the deadlines, even like the paperwork and dealing with the NIH, and having them to talk to was super useful as well. And one of them is actually going to NYU, and we have a new Slack community for New York City PIs, which I'm excited about. So I think he's going to be like a long-term friend now. Okay, so one of the last things I want to talk about is imposter syndrome. And I think that most of us know what imposter syndrome is at this point, but it's basically feeling like you don't deserve to be where you are, and that soon people are going to discover that you don't deserve to be where you are. I like definitely have that feeling right now giving this talk, like, who am I to be doing this? Like, what? But I think it's just important to know that, like, especially during the job search, everyone experiences it. It gets really bad. I kept thinking like, oh, once I get my offer, it'll be better. Got worse. And I was like, oh, once I like sign my offer, it'll get better. Got worse. Like, only now am I starting to be like, oh no, I'm like actually a PI, and like it's okay. So like just be prepared. And so the NIH OITE YouTube has some good webinars about dealing with imposter fears. I think it's really helpful to talk to peers and colleagues because you realize that everyone has these fears, and it makes you feel less alone, and it makes it easier to identify that they are imposter fears and that it's your brain lying to you. And then in general, just be kind to yourself and take care of yourself and eat a whole Papa John's pizza if that's what you need to do. And then I just really like this meme because I think it really speaks to the roller coaster of emotions that happens during this process. Where like you really got to psych yourself. Like I sent applications to Yale, and like you really got to psych yourself up for that kind of stuff. But then I literally was just laying in bed like an anxious mess, waiting for interviews, like prepping. It's a roller coaster. I'm so glad it's over. Okay, and then the last thing is the issue of rejection. I think it's really important to understand that you're going to get rejected a lot. People are going to ghost you. You're going to get ignored. It's just going to happen. And it's not about you. They're getting hundreds and hundreds of applications. And it really comes down to fit. And it's one of those things where it all depends on what the department's looking for. Like I applied to departments where like my research was an outlier, but they still I still did Zooms with them. So they're still interested in me. And then there are other places where I thought, oh, I'd be a really good fit. My research is really close to this person and this person. And I didn't get interviews, probably because I seemed redundant. And like, it's totally up to what the department is looking for. It's not about me. It's not about my research. It's just so competitive, and you just can't take the rejection personally. It actually got really easy. I think I got like desensitized to rejection through this process because of how much I was getting rejected, which is like kind of a nice perk, I guess. But again, with rejection, I think it helps to, talk with your peers and colleagues. And, it's okay to like be sad or frustrated when you get rejected. I think it's fine to feel those feelings, but just feel them and then just move on from them. And it gets easier and easier to move on from them with time. So I think that the takeaways are basically to start early preparing yourself for the job market. You have to start early to be getting all the pieces in place and to be doing everything you need to be doing so that when the time does come, you're ready. And you want to be you want to be authentic. And by being you're going to differentiate yourself from your PI. And it's going to let you build a career that makes you happy and satisfied. And then be brave. My grant, I didn't feel ready to be on the job market, but I applied anyway. And taking risks is really important. If you always wait until you feel like you're ready, you're never going to be ready. Like you have to just go for it at a certain point. And resiliency is important because you're going to get rejected. It's going to be hard. But everyone's going through it. You're not alone, even though it feels like you're alone. Like it's what everyone's going through. And then don't be afraid to ask for help because people around you want to help you and can help you. You just have to ask for it. And so I can answer questions now. I guess I went a little bit over, but these are also all my contacts. I'm happy to answer specific questions. Really trying to build my own Twitter following. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, I would love that. And then these are like my new lab website and Instagram. So yeah, feel free to contact me. I'm more than happy to like share documents or answer questions.
Hi, Samantha.
You
Hi, I'm attending online, so can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, yeah, I have a question actually about negotiating your, your salary. Sometimes it's tough to start. If there is a range that you can negotiate, for example, they give you 10K or 100. So that you cannot ask much higher than they cannot afford, right?
Yeah, so my attitude towards it, so I have heard that for salary negotiation, you should always ask for 20% more. The worst they can do is say, no, we can't do that and give you a lower number. And the other nice thing about Future PI Slack is on that anonymous spreadsheet, they also have an anonymous like negotiations tab on it where you can see what other schools are offering other people to sort of give you an idea based on location, school, field, like what other people are getting offered, which sort of lets you get a better idea of how much they should be offering you and what you can or should ask for.
Yes. For the PI, that is salary negotiation. So another question that do you suggest that for the salary negotiation for the postdoc?
You mean negotiating like for a postdoc position you're in now?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I don't have the answer to that question.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Very good talk and very helpful.
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah.
So you mentioned chalk talks.
Yeah.
I'm wondering where can we practice or observe the chalk talks?
So chalk talks are hard to get like examples of because like no one really records them. I think the way a lot of people practice is just with other PIs in the department. So most people, I mean, to get their job, they did a chalk talk. So like other faculty have seen other chalk talks too. So if you can give a practice chalk talk to other faculty in the department, that's like generally a good way to practice because then they can.
What are the topics in the talks?
Most of the time people just talk about their first R01. Like you outline the first R01.
Oh, so it's all about research.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did you like have to pre-draw any figures or anything to give one of those? Just because like I've seen a chalk talk in chemistry, but it was like physical chemistry, so it's a lot different, than like drawing something.
Yeah. So the chalk talk, I think, is the thing that is most different. That because of COVID and Zoom, like I was doing it like on PowerPoint with a tablet, and like I did have some prepared slides because that's how you're doing it. Yeah. And like I think that is the least applicable. Like my experience is the least applicable generally with chalk talk because I had some prepared drawings. And I know that some people, even like in real world chalk talks, you can sort of go into the room half an hour early and like draw some schematics early. So like, I don't have a great, that chalk talk is like the least experience that I have. Also, my chalk talks I thought were bad. I wouldn't
It's
tell
like
anyone
we
to do
give
that.
a presentation about our research.
Yeah.
Oh.
Hey Sam, I was just wondering about what did you do about the teaching statements? They are required many times, right? I mean, you mentioned about the medical school. It's not probably that important, but you still have to fill in something, right?
To be honest, I don't think I wrote. I didn't ever write a pure teaching statement. So any of the teaching statements I wrote were teaching / mentoring statements, and those I can write. Like I've mentored people. I mentored Caitlin. So like mentoring I can do. And I reached a point where if they needed a pure teaching statement, it was because there was going to be undergrad teaching responsibilities. And I reached a point where I didn't want that. I didn't want it. I didn't want a job like that, so I didn't even apply. So any teaching statement I did was teaching / mentoring, and any of the teaching that I talked about in the teaching mentoring statement was like mentoring. Like I really didn't talk that much about teaching in any of my statements.
So publication would be the most important thing to apply for a job in academia.
So I don't think I can answer that. I haven't sat on search committees, so I don't know. Like I have heard different people say that it's not the most important. It's also like in what respect is it important? Like there are definitely places where you have to have a cell science Nature paper. But there are other places where they just want to see consistent publications and like productivity, and like the tier of the journal isn't as important. I also don't know what's being said behind closed doors. Like they might say to postdocs in a webinar that publications don't matter that much, but like I don't know what's happening behind closed doors. So I don't feel like I can really answer that.
It can't hurt to have more.
I mean, I received comments at various points noting that my publication record wasn't as strong as it could be, but that was more centered around
what kind of analysis is that anyway? Like, what does that even mean? Like,
yeah, I was also at a point where I was like, I can't do anything about that. Like, okay. But that comment was around negotiations, not about like getting the job or not. It was about like how much my salary was going to be.
I just feel it's hard to determine when I feel I'm ready to apply for a job, you know.
Yeah, so I will say when I submitted my applications, my main paper was in revision, and my like other first author where I was co-first listed second, I think had been accepted by that point. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you about that. Like clearly they're going to look at publications, and it's just, like I will say, if you have papers that are like in preparation and like getting close to being submitted or have been submitted, it's a good idea to put them on bioRxiv, because you can reference them when they're on bioRxiv, and like that goes on your CV as a publication. Some applications explicitly tell you not to do that, but most places don't care. And if it's on bioRxiv, the people reviewing your application can go read that paper. Like they have access to it and like have more confidence that like that paper is done. And it's really like some people put on their CV like in preparation a paper that they've done like one experiment for. But if you have it done on bioRxiv and it's done enough that it's going on bioRxiv and people can look at it and like look at the work and see what the experiments are, see the quality and scope of the project, like that gives weight to publications that just aren't like quite there yet. You like still get credit for the work that is like in progress and close.
To me, it seems like you have to get a grant to get an offer.
So that's not true. So I think a lot of people say that, and I will say that's not true. For some schools, you have to have a grant. So Rutgers, it really seems they like to hire people that already have Ks. That is not true across the board. Plenty of people get jobs without having a K award. It is totally possible. And I think that's like, it becomes a really bad stigma for postdocs to have that attitude, because K awards are really hard to get. And if that's the bar to get a job, then it makes it feel unachievable to get a job. But you can totally get a job without a K award.
Now I feel more confident. More confident.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sam.
thank you guys. I got 4 new Twitter followers.
I just followed you on
Oh,
Instagram.
there you go.
I'm not on Twitter. I'm too old or something. Thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you, Sam, so much for this invaluable information. It's great. I just want to mention one quick thing. We did record today, so I'm going to send you guys, if you registered, I'm going to send you the recording so you can refer back to it and the PowerPoint presentation. If you joined us and you did not register, go ahead and sign in and give me your email address so I can make sure to send that to you. And anyone that's still on Zoom, email me and let me know if you didn't register so I can send that to you. All right, thanks so much.
Hi.
Okay, thanks guys for coming.
Sorry, I wanted to complain just for not sending photographs earlier. I think
You're out.
yes.
We've never met.
Yeah, I've seen you, so I guess, yeah.
I mean, I was a postdoc for over 5 years, so I've let you know. I think that the length of the postdoc is so like 5 or 6 years for my field is like
Well, nice.
not
That question about diversity.
but I know for like chemistry things can be faster, like engineering things are way faster. So
So
like
I
maybe
also-
an engineering postdoc would be weird if you were there for I
There's,
don't know.
we have like.
But I think it's just the length of postdoc is very dependent. And I honestly I don't feel like I've heard of people being judged for length work.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Like if you're
there a
productive
position
during
that
that time.
that we could be made
That's
for
what
Yeah, we care about.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great.
Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Engage interest, and then I'm co-chairs with the medical students, so she and I work together, so we can work together.
Mhm.
Okay,
Great.
thank you for
Nice to
listening.
meet you. Hi. Hi, I'm you.
Some you better than us.
Yeah, what's your name?
Family.
I tried for the faculty one and they did not much. So he felt maybe after some years.
It's also
That would be great.
it's one of those things where
Let me know what like.
that might just be a thing of that panel.
So,
And like some departments just have things that they're weird about. And like if it's not a consistent thing that's coming up, it might just be like a weird issue that that department has or whatever. Does that make sense? Like every like interview panel and every seminar is different about what they care about.
that focus can be on anything.
Does that make sense?
That you think would be helpful.
So that is must be
I do every couple of years
some
a
people they get
postdoc survey
experience.
Mhm.
They may
that
not.
could be
So,
used to help
I say,
help you
I
decide.
Visual research.
My office tends to
2010 to 2015.
Okay, we overlap briefly then.
Where were you?
I was in the IND.
writing and
Were you in that?
What is that?
The Institute for Neurodegenerative
Oh, okay.
Diseases.
What building?
It's by Jim and
career talks.
Camden.
Anything
I was in
that they-
Gen Tech.
Oh,
What
okay.
years were you there?
Hmm?
What years were you
I
there?
was there in 2013 summer as an RE student.
Okay.
I don't know if you know who Jason Gostwicki is.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, so he's my father's student.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I know. My parents are both
That's crazy.
professors.
Where at?
As well.
So now they're professors at Southeastern Louisiana University, but they taught, my dad taught Gostwicki at SUNY Fredonia
Okay.
in upstate New York. Yeah, and so I worked for him because I was only
But I help her.
16. That's why I graduated from college when I was 18. So like he had to like under the
How did you?
table.
Okay.
Yeah, my dad's a chemistry professor. My mom's a math professor. So. I know, but that's funny that you know him. That's really interesting.
Well, I don't like know. I don't.
Well, yeah,
I don't
but
know
you
him.
you
I know
were
who.
aware.
I know.
And yeah, no, that's cool. I remember being there. Like there was like I mean, like I'm sure you're aware of like Stanley Krusner and stuff. Like he like they built the IND for him. He discovered prions. He got a Nobel for that. But he had like a meeting. I think Tom Meek. You know who that is? Like I'm sorry.
No, it's
Like,
fine.
I didn't know who
have
this was
really,
either.
I have really honestly, the worst thing on my interviews was I have really bad name recognition and I don't know people in the field that I should.
Terrible too.
That
I
was
have
like the
faces,
worst.
but I can't remember names. But Tom Meek, so I didn't know who he was at the time, but it was Stanley Krusner had like a conference for like unpublished work, and it was like overseen by like Tom Meek, because like Tom Meek, I think like got big with GSK and stuff. Like he like helped build like GSK and stuff. Or was high up there, and he was overseeing it. I remember like I had no clue what was going on because like this is like all hardcore research, and I knew he was savaging his figures. Like he was just like destroying them. I think it was part of the process. I think like the whole point was for like him, and there was another lady with him that were like supposed to just like destroy your research to try and like
I just hate that attitude.
I know, but I just remember being so like blown away by like how he was talking to people, and then like now he's a professor here.
Okay, the thing is, so if there are young, impressionable people like you in the audience seeing that that's how science works, that makes science scary.
Oh, I know, I know,
like,
but yeah, exactly.
It's things where it's like,
But yeah, for like a regular undergrad, you're just full of photographics.
Yeah, because like generally it's not like that, right? Like
I mean, there's like my boss here when I was a PhD student in the chemistry department, and now I work for the biochemistry and biophysics department now as a postdoc. Hello.
Co-president does that.
He collaborates with Cedric.
I feel like I could do all
that is here. His collaborator works on this. But no, Pella does like we do like I'm working right now like extracellular vesicles for like delivery of stuff. But my PhD was DNA nanotechnology, like just straight like building DNA circuitry. And
that kind of stuff's really good.
yeah, I mean, I like my boss came from Scripps doing aptamers, specifically L-DNA, L-RNA aptamers. He worked for Jerry Joyce at Scripps. But like myself and my buddy, who we both like finished at almost the same time, like we started at the same time in John's lab. We came up with making circuits that can incorporate L-DNA into them, like which was like that was our JAX paper for major. Yeah, it's interesting that you went to UCSF. I've like thought about like I want to postdoc like basically like I think your postdoc's interesting. I'm moving from chemistry. Like I grew up.
It does make sense. I understand that, and I have some
application and number theory from undergrad. Then I shifted to chemistry, and then like when I came here, I wanted to do biology, but like I want to do like immunology or neuroscience or something. So UCSF sounds cool.
Tailgating at one of the
I could do Berkeley.
Yeah, it was
I
hard.
like Berkeley.
San
Like, that
Francisco
area
is
really
it's very expensive, and UCSF is very stressful because like everyone there's so smart. They're like talking about imposter syndrome. It's like it was bad, and like it's also just very competitive because just everyone is so high achieving, and it just gets stressful.
Was it like negatively competitive to a point? Because like I heard there's like a professor, there's like a guy in the chemical department who started his PI career like at the same time as my boss.
I had the
He's from
results
Harvard.
from the last.
Harvard is
Dude named David Nocera, who's like the gigantic asshole in the
Yeah.
world.
And
And like
then
he's also like that. Like I mean like what the fuck are you doing? Like in the hallway in front of everyone. Like it's like insane. Like it's bad. My boss never like yelled at us, but like definitely would just like tell us our ideas are stupid, and then like 3 months later someone else in the lab is working on it, and you're just like
so like UCSF had like you
can do
lab
it.
meetings.
Make it what you
show up to lab meetings.
I used to be the
This is like very specific, but like in my lab, someone showed up to lab meeting and someone else was presenting their project, which
really?
Yeah.
So where are you right now?
But generally, I think UCSF is just like really like high caliber, smart people. It's very much a boys' club, which I didn't appreciate as a woman. But like Harvard and MIT, I think is more
Really?
like
Oh my gosh, that's way. So when did you get your PhD? A year ago? Is that what you spent?
yeah.
I mean it's MIT, right?
And yeah, it's gonna be psychotic.
I honestly don't know.
I don't know.
It's also one of those things where it's like you can find good people anywhere, right?
That is true. No,
And you
I
can find
totally-
assholes everywhere.
I totally agree with that. I mean,
And I didn't
like, I don't necessarily care. Like, I would like to maybe match A&M in
Yeah. And what made you
quality of school, because I postdoc for my PhD boss for like a couple months because I defended in May last year, like right when the pandemic was happening. So like I like postdoc for like I guess it was like 9 months or something.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and then I switched to this lab, which is like something completely different. But I still think like I want to go to at least. I mean, like if I could.
And I've been interviewing with
Well, and there are some things that
Like
you
honestly, I will
No, I think
probably
you should.
apply to like Jennifer Nelson's lab. Like,
And
I
I
don't give a shit.
realized
Like I met her when she was here. Like she's super awesome. Like I totally agree with you. Like I'm tired of working for
well,
like
and that's another thing that we
asshole
did years
dudes.
ago.
Like when I was in college, since I was so young, like all the girls were to me. So like I sympathize with like seeing everything as a boys. It's pretty lame.
I think going to places like UCSF,
And that would be really fun.
is really good for you. I think
My problem is
seeing
I
like
want
cutting edge
to
research and
not
lots of
have
resources.
So like
Then I would say like Berkeley or CSF because like
Yeah.
it's still West Coast. Like chill.
this is fair. This is
And
fair.
fun. I
Yeah,
mean, it's fun.
I'm
It's really
looking at,
fun.
like Salk Institute, probably. Like I think like UCSD and Salk
Yeah, I mean,
Institute
San
would be
Diego's
cool.
amazing.
Yeah, I've been there once and I was like,
I did a summer of research in San Diego.
like if I'm gonna pay, you know, an astronomical price, I'd rather be in San Diego than San Francisco. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And
those places are good too. I mean,
my
yeah.
son,
And
I
what
think
is
I
this
would encourage you.
NIAID? Like,
So it's national. It's the National
know that was a
Institute
thing.
of
allergies. Oh, so
It's one of
this
them.
is after what's his name? Fauci.
Yeah, he's in charge of it.
Grandpa Fauci was just sitting there with a gavel, like. But that is awesome. Like, congratulations. I mean, that is crazy. Like, I'm
about some of that.
trying to put together an F-32
Yeah.
for this fall application
What I
cycle.
really
It took me 2 days to find the tabs with the information for it. So
It's
turned you off.
it's bananas.
yeah.
I think that it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
I was like,
Actually, I texted her in the middle of this talk because you were like, oh, you should like, read your emails and like go to these. Like,
Should.
she says the same stuff. Specifically, though, yesterday she won an iPad from like filling out the
Maybe
survey,
they did it.
and everyone's like, oh, this probably just like
maybe. And
nobody
like,
applied, and she's like, yeah, it probably is, except I
But you know
applied,
what?
so like
You know
my
what?
chances
Yeah.
are 1 or 2, and I feel like that's kind
for
of how
grants.
grants are. Yeah,
Honestly,
like,
that's how my DP2 was because I wasn't that competitive when I applied, but not many people applied. So,
Yeah,
and I
it's just
knew that. I was like,
difficult to
if not a
apply
lot
for
of people are applying,
Good way
like,
to get.
even though I'm not as competitive as I could be, the pool is smaller.
yeah,
Because I can
So
imagine.
it's worth it.
Like, I'm interested. in
clearly
more.
was. So
So it,
I mean, I don't know.
yeah, I get annoyed when people are like, oh, there's no opportunity to do university and stuff. And it's like, you just don't.
They're making.
yeah,
Like,
that
there
or
is.
just I mean, people
Options there. Because they're
I'm
kind
not
of
know what to
limited
do. Like just go to a fucking school and like go like volunteer for like whatever they do. It's
Or
really
like,
easy.
I don't know, volunteer to be on the postdoc association.
So like
How
It just-
is that a lot of time
outreach.
or no? Because like
If you do
I
that,
have just like never been part of school clubs ever in my
Yeah.
life. Like I just like all the like PLU shit here. Like I just like thought it was stupid and like they just like wanted like money from me or whatever, and I didn't feel like it was
yeah,
worth
our
anything.
postdocs don't have money. Our postdocs associations don't have money. And like, I think I've
But to
gotten.
be like on the executive board, like does it take a
It
lot
takes
of time?
time. I think I don't know what the status is of the A&M Postdoc Association right now.
I know the dude
that
who's the head of it, so
Is it still?
goals are, I think.
No, I can just tell you right now. You go ahead.
It was all-
When we I mean, typically we would do an election.
Future goals are in charge of it. No, I just know him because he works in the chemistry department.
So
Like,
there's
friends with him.
chemistry also has its own postdoc association also.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So there's a
Probably
chemistry postdoc association, there's a vet school postdoc
Just
association.
kind of ask around.
There's like the full.
I'll see if there's
postdoc
interest.
Because, you know,
association,
one
and
of the
there's the
things
health
that maybe
science postdoc association.
I see. Okay.
And like depending on which one, it's variable amounts of work. Like the tandem wide one was a decent amount of work because
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
giant
yeah.
and like
So.
because of the way it's structured.
Was that the one you were in?
Two student workers.
But like Stacey's postdoc association, like
Okay.
it's much better.
Oh,
The
like
health
this
science,
health
yeah,
science.
like
I mean, like, would I qualify for being in that? I guess.
I have no idea.
I'm in the agrolife division or whatever. No, I'll figure it out. All right, I'll quit bothering you, but thanks for talking to me.
Thanks for coming, Adam.
I kept smiling. I was like, oh my gosh, this is probably our last talk.
probably is your last time.
Unless I have to do like
Like an exit.
for training or something.
Oh yeah.
Sam, do you want one of these?
Chicken. I'm okay.
Are you
Thanks.
sure?
Yeah. Okay. I started doing Blue Apron, and I have Blue Apron leftovers. And I have to cook my Blue Apron. I have a lot of yeah, I get rid of my food.
I guess all of this.
Is it you now?
It's literally
You
no
should be.
way.
I mean,
well, now that I wasn't gonna sign up. Like
I think you know all the ideas that I think you should execute.
when I saw an email go out,
Do you have something else that you think?
I just started my postdoc. Imposter syndrome.
I'm
president of PD.
So you make friends.
Also, like,
Come on, come on.
Larry Good, there's that outreach at like high school. And I like high schoolers and middle schoolers, like,
And
those
people
things would be fun to
also
me.
like people want to do that kind of volunteer work but don't know how to.
Yeah.
And the postdoc association was like running it. They would probably volunteer.
Like,
I think you should do postdoc research in fluorescence.
yeah, that's a good idea.
I always told Christine to do that too. Exactly. I know.
It's a great idea.
I know.
It's just give me all your ideas.
Yeah. I'll tell you how to run it.
Thank you, Sam.
Thanks for asking me to give it.
Okay.
Your meeting has ended.